Good morning. Hemshechayim Beis. We're on page 1178. Aleph Kuf Ayin Ches. Those of you in New York, I'm sure you can appreciate you don't have to walk out in this major snow. So we do have technology, it seems to be immune to the elements. So we can learn in the warmth of our own homes. Even though I should say, since we're learning Ayin Beis, that Rebbe Rashab, the year Tofrei Samach Daled, that would be 1904. There was a big snowstorm in Lubavitch. Lubavitch had a lot of snow, and this was a snowstorm. So what did the Rebbe Rashab do? He wrote a Reshima called Sheleg. He wrote a Kabbalah Hasidic. It's printed in the back of Sefer Maimorim Tofrei Samach Daled. So if you're looking for homebound snow activities, you can learn that Maimer, that Reshima, I should say. He didn't deliver it, he wrote it. I actually gave...
In Beis, we also have Sheleg. I think we learned about Sheleg in Beis.
Yeah, but that's a whole Reshima called Sheleg. And Chassidus talks about snow. I actually gave a series of classes in the blizzard of 1998. I gave a few classes about the spiritual significance of snow. Okay, that's just a intro. So where are we here? And interestingly, snow is also an interface, just for the record, between ice, rain. Snow is a very high hamshache. Levusheha kitlag chiver. Atik Yemen's, his garments is white as snow. So, we are here in a pretty interesting and unique piece about machshava, the levush of machshava. So I'm going to go over it Baal Peh right now, orally. It's page 1177 and 1178, and then continue where we left off. So the flow of the Maimer is going to explain Shiluv Havaya Ba'adnai Ba'havaya and Shiluv Havaya Ba'adnai, which means the unity of these two divine names. Each one has a different track. Havaya is beyond existence. Oden, as he said, from Pasuk Eliyahu, is Antish Tamuda Oden Al Kula. His Oden Al Kula is the master and of everything, which means he relates to existence and he's above existence, obviously, like a melech. It's a different word, Oden. So, in explaining that, Rebbe Rashab is going to compare Oden to Dibur, the levush of Dibur, meaning how God expresses himself to another, in contrast to the levush of Machshava, which is what we're in the middle of learning, this levush of Machshava. So on one hand, the Rebbe Rashab built a case and said the levush of Machshava is only a levush. A levush is a garment. A garment is an add-on. It's not the etzem thing. When you say a garment, that alone means it's not the thing itself. It's a garment that dresses up, whatever it may be. The question is, what type of garment? So he said that even though Machshava on one hand is what calls a levush kamoy davar achar, like something else, not like ha'ara, a reflection, which is only a reflection and not like another thing of the entity. Machshava, he says, is kamoy davar achar because it has osius. It includes and carries whatever it's a machshava to, whether it's to a thought, an idea, or a feeling, it gives it body, basically. When I say body, I don't mean physical body. It gives it form and shape through letters. Even though it's true the machshava is to yourself, but it's still a conscious thought. That was the first half. And with a whole elaboration that on atzmus there's not shaykh levush. So basically, and the second, no, I should have, let me reverse the order. The second point in this levush, that a levush is not on the etzem. And it's not even on the higher levels of giluyim, like he said on the face. A levush is a garment for the levels that are already in forms of expression, giluyim. That's where the levush of machshava comes into play. Okay. Look, he says, so the primary part of this levush, of a levush, is when there's a gili of keches hanefesh. In other words, when you want to conceive of an idea, let's say, or you want to and express an emotion, that's where machshava and then the other levushim as well, dibra ma'aser, come into play. That's the most basic element. So what do we know from this? That machshava is not the thing itself. But then he adds something you don't really find very often in Chassidus, the other side of the coin with machshava. Now, usually, just for contrast, usually the Maimorim go like this. Okay, machshava is a levush, but it's a levush that's connected to the person. Because when you're thinking to yourself, that thought is connected to seichel and midas that are being expressed through that thought to yourself, whereas dibur is already relating to another. That's usually the second half of the story. So yes, machshava is a garment compared to the nefesh, keiches ha-nefesh, but compared to dibur, it's an internal type of garment, a connected. Sometimes it says a levush ha-miyuchad, not a levush ha-nifrad, as would be dibur. But here, he doesn't go there. He says something else much deeper. He says, in truth, there's another side to machshava. Machshava plays a role even before the keiches begin to emerge. We're talking about keiches pratim. Even before the keiches really manifest, whether it's chabad, seichel, or midas. He doesn't really talk about midas, but it's the same idea that machshava plays a role, to use the lashon of the Rebbe Rashab, Makol Mokel Levusha Machshava Shemalbish Etzem HaKeiches Kedem Shein B'Mehus Keiches Adayin. So it's already serving as a form of a garment, even before they are actual functional faculties. Which immediately he jumps up and say, 1 second, is a machshava a garment for the faculty? If you want to conceive of an idea or bina, so the levush of machshava is the thought of the idea. So he says, no, there's something, a machshava that precedes the actual emergence of the actual specific faculty. And how does he explain it? So I'm reviewing what we learned yesterday. He explains it like this. He says, Shari Oniroyim, we see that's possible for a person not to have a particular idea in your mind, but still machshava is there. Not that you're conscious of it. We'll talk in a moment what the machshava is, but you cannot be thinking about concentrating on any particular concept or idea. And still, I'll just use the atheist to be very precise. He says, it doesn't say there are no ideas in the concealed part of your mind. Obviously, there's ideas there that you can access. But we're talking about right now active. Actively, you're not in any way concentrating or focusing on any idea. And nevertheless, by machshava, you don't say that. Ubilti machshava ene yochalius. So a seichel gali, a particular seichel prati, that he's going to soon describe as a seichel prati, that may not exist. But machshava is impossible, even for 1 second, that a person shouldn't have machshava. The gam kasher ene cheshev mu'uma. Even when he's not thinking of anything particular, his thoughts are never completely empty. Something is always turning. And then he gives the example, like when you say to somebody, you ask someone, what are you thinking about? He says nothing. The truth is, he is thinking. That's why you're asking him that question, because it's impossible for a person not to have any thoughts. So why does he say nothing? It's not a machshava that you're sensing something. It's like it's sometimes you're not even thinking about it. It's just your thoughts are flowing, as I said, daydreaming, or maybe someone mentions subconscious. However you explain it, it's not a deliberate thought. It's things just flowing. It's like the wheel is turning. But so why? Because the machshava is not applying itself to any particular focused, concentrated idea. And yet there's thought there too. Afterwards, he gives the example of a person, even though he may not be thinking an idea, but he knows he has seichel. There's awareness of your intelligence, even if you're not focusing on a particular intelligent thing. So what do we see from this? V'hainu shemachshava milabeshes as keiach haseichel hashedu mizgala b'moyach shebereish koydem shu b'chinas mahus mitzias seichel adayin. So a focused idea, a specific idea is not there yet. But machshava is like I described yesterday, a field of energy. Something is moving. There's a wheel turning, waiting at the point when you are going to focus on a particular idea. Machshav is ready. Machshav is constantly alive. It never ceases in any sense of the word. We'll soon have more asias for this. He's going to compare it to the nefesh itself. It's just like saying the fact that a person's alive. That doesn't mean you're necessarily actualizing any faculty. You can be alive and just doing nothing. You could be alive, you could be asleep. But the life force never stops. The life force is always there. So when you are ready to produce a function, you're ready, you're all ready. It's not like you have to revive the whole machine. It's not like the machine goes to sleep and now we're ready to do something. The mind doesn't go, the mind or the machshava doesn't go to sleep. It's always alive. The question is whether it's something murgeshes, a particular thought, an idea, or just rolling. So therefore, once you are ready to go, meaning to focus on something, you have a machshava ready. You don't have to warm it up, so to speak, and say, let me get this machine going again. Just to put it in different aces. Okay. Then the next parentheses, he goes deeper, he explains it more specifically where we really get the picture. He says it's kamoy ma she'adam margish sheyeh seichel b'meichei gam b'shah she'ein eisek b'meskolos. So now he's going to compare it. Even though this is not machshava, but he says now that there are three levels. He specifically spells out three levels, which is all in the words v'achachma ma'ayin timotza. So we have chachma, we have ayin, and we have timotza. Ayin, where chachma originates from, is koyach hamaskil. So the fact that a person knows they're an intelligent creature, even without concentrating on anything, that he says that clearly. Margish shabaresh koydem shu b'chinas. I'm sorry. Margish yes seichel b'meichei gam b'shah she'ein eisek b'meskolos shezeh ma'ir ha'seichel hanimshach m'koyach hamaskil. That's the power to generate ideas. Koyach hamaskil is a koyach in the nefesh. It's not seichel. It's not in any form of intelligence. It's the power to be able to conceive ideas. That's level one. He doesn't say yet the levels. Let me finish the whole summary and then we'll take any questions because it's important to have this flow. So he says, and this is Chochmah Ma'ayin. Where's the Ayin? Ayin is an unknown state because it's the Koyach HaMaskil, he says clearly. Sheyesh kan gimel madregas. Ha'ayin u Koyach HaMaskil kol haskolas Koyach Hiyuli. That's Keser Shebachachma. That's level one. As we explained, there's not even any expression altogether. It's a power. It's like a potential state. Koyach HaMaskil, just like a nefesh has a koyach to do chesed, it has a koyach to conceive ideas and understand ideas. But nothing has happened yet. It's just there. So a human being is born with that. Every human being is born with a koyach HaMaskil. How active it's going to be is already dependent on how much work you're going to do, maturity, growth, and so on. But it's a koyach. The nefesh comes ready. As soon as a person is born, all the koyachs nefesh are there. They don't come later into your life. The question, they're not yet active. Just like many things, a newborn baby has, let's say, musical talent. It's there in the koyach nefesh, in the koyach hamaskil or koyach ha'atzmi, the different levels. It's not yet expressed. It may take years to be expressed. And frankly, the other way around as well. There may be many koyachs in you right now that you've never expressed at all, that remain dormant in that hiyuli state. Okay. So that's koyach hamaskil, the ayin keser shebachachma. Then comes next state. Now something is emerging. Seichel is beginning to become a reality, but it's not in any defined way. To use let's go exact words of the Rebbe Rashab. And what's Chochmah in Ma'ayin Timotza Ayin? We just explained. And what's the Chochmah that's coming from the Ayin? Hu b'chinas hispashtus ha'seichel. B'chinas hamshochas hamshocha mekeich hamaskal asher b'meich shebereish b'tmidus. So now he's calling hispashtus ha'seichel, meaning that seichel is an active force. Remember we spoke, for example, when we talked about, just to give an example, every person is born with a desire, the rotzen, to have a home. Ein adam b'lei Beis, ein adam b'lei karka. That's how Hashem made it. In Chassidus it explains, because just the Eibishter, Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu, Liyos B'tachtenim, we also have embedded within us to have a home. Just like we have Ein Adam B'lei Isha. These are two things that are inherent from birth. But when is the first time a person thinks about having a home? Not when they're 1 day old. So you don't think about it until later. At some point in your life, whether it's a shidduch or a home, and I mentioned Rabbi Yosef Engel, and the Rebbe brings Chassidus, and the Rebbe brings Rabbi Yosef Engel, is a chalchkira whether they're connected, because ishti zu beisi. So you could argue it's the same thing, a home and a wife, because they're connected, building a home. But regardless, it's not relevant to the discussion. But it can lay dormant inside your nefesh for years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever. Then there's an awakening. Something happens. Either it's a maturity, either it's other factors, doesn't matter what the reason is. Then there becomes an active consciousness that I'm ready to get married, or I'm ready to date, or I'm ready to build a home. Let's use the home better example, because that's the example used earlier here in the Maimonim. Okay, but we learned, if you remember in Tzadik Dalet particularly, that still doesn't mean it could be years until you actualize it. You could just think about it. You're thinking, okay, it would be a beautiful thing for me to have a home. Usually it comes when a person's ready to get married, that time. But it could be different times, but let's say. Then it could take another 10 years, 20 years. In Tzadik Dalet, he said, Kamashanim, until you're not, you know what? I'm going to now get myself a home, build a home, or buy a home. What happened? There was a state when it was like the koyach hamaskil, it was in you. You weren't even aware of it. Well, he says, you're aware that you have seichel. You could say that, like he said. So there's something. Then there's a point where it becomes an active force. But you know what? It could be an active force, and the next day, you're not focusing on it, because you're not even planning to build it yet. Then comes the time you begin to plan it. That's a good example, an example only, for these three levels in seichel as well. And the truth is, in all keiches hanefesh, you can find these three. How it's embedded within you and not yet really seichel at all, even though you may sense something. In the home, you can maybe sense you're not complete. I don't know, however you explain it. Then there's an active seichel, mispashtus seichel, but who gam kein eine b'mitzias seichel mamish, k'may seichel prati. But it's not yet a seichel mamish. Why? Because it's the active process that you're using intelligence. Let's talk about the child. The newborn the intelligence is only around survival. But then the first time a child begins to learn things. So they're not necessarily concentrating on something, but seichel has become active. I'm just using the example of a child, just my own example. He doesn't say that here at all. The truth is, this is all relevant right now as adults. So then there's seichel, but it's not a seichel prati. So it's not b'mitzias mamish. It's not quite anymore the koyach hamaskil. There's something active, but it's not active in any particular way. Then comes the third level, the seichel prati. But to talk more about level 2, he says this is b'chinas eir seichel akaponim v'mokar goli el asichlim hapratim. And then within the parentheses, he says this is the alulius, like ilav olol. Now we have something that he calls the interface between koyach hamaskil and an active specific idea. What is the interface? This eir seichel. That's what he calls it. Ilulius lasichlim hapratim. So what is bitmidus? This er seichel is now not just the power to generate ideas. There's an er seichel that's there, bitmidus, who olu lahaskel mekeich hamaskil b'chol davar seichel. And then he adds, by a chacham gadol, this thing is increasing, what's the word he uses? Er seichel anal etzle b'yeser. It's more increased, it's more prominent. And that's why you recognize someone as a wise person, even if that's not because they said something wise or they did something wise. They just have that seichel. Seichel is radiating by them. That's why he's more capable this Chacham Gadol to conceive of ideas, more ideas than a regular mind. And then he calls it's like Ilav Olul, good. And neither that this is like a mamutza between the Koyach HaMaskil and the Seichel Prati. The two levels, the first level that we said, Ayin is Keser of Chochmah. Chochmah is Chochmah of Chochmah. And the Seichel Prati, the third level, when it comes to a specific idea, is Yesod of Chochmah, which then moves to Bina. That's what we established. Now we go back to Machshava.
What is exactly the middle? What is this? It's not a Seichel Prati, but what is this?
Okay, I don't have any more words than I already said, to be very honest. I just gave an example with the Ratzon for a bias. If that's not enough, I'm not sure what more I could say. Now we go back to Machshava. So he says, Machshava hi shemelabeshes b'chinas habeis hanal. Machshava is the garment. We're talking now the higher element of Machshava. It's a garment for the second level of Seichel, the level of Chochmah. Not Koyach HaMaskil, but the level of Chochmah, that's the interface. That now you have the idea that there's an active Seichel in the person. That active Seichel, the levush of that active Seichel is Machshava. So now we have, that's where you see, so Machshava is always there, like that Seichel is always there. Machshava is, of course, the consciousness of it, because Machshava is a garment. The Seichel alone needs a garment. So the Er HaSeichel in level 2, Chochmah, which is not yet a specific idea, but there is a conscious intelligence. And if someone asks that person, what are you thinking about? They'll say nothing because it's not yet any specific focus. It's just thought, the thought process that is always alive. Like I said, the life force, you're always alive, even if you're not fulfilling any particular function. Even if your faculties are not doing anything, you're alive. So here the mind is alive. And a Bas Seichel who's not yet, a Chacham Gadol, who's not yet even being involved in a particular thing, you know he's an intelligent person. What is that intelligence? That means his Seichel is alive in a powerful way. Now you can come and ask him something and you'll get something of a powerful concept or idea. That is where Machshava therefore reside, and that therefore precedes Koyach Prati of Seichel. So to go back to the original language, he said that Machshava, though it's a levush, and that means it's already serving a role before the Koyach becomes an active particular function. So therefore we have now, essentially, as I explained yesterday, the purpose of this is with the Pnimis Hakel and Lamaila, because what you really want to have is many possible steps from an etzem to a final product. So here you have steps. The etzem first expresses itself through a koyach hamaskil. That koyach hamaskil comes in a state of gilui, but only a gilui in a general sense of the word. And then it becomes a gilui prati and a koyach prati. So this is, of course, clearly the three stages that he spoke about earlier, lifnei tzimtzum, etzem eir, ispashtus eir, and ispashtus eir itself, the atzmei luzulose. So you have basically these three levels in different places. I'm not going to say it's exactly those three levels, but we go back earlier in his Maimorim here, especially in Sadik Daled, he kept spelling out levels like this, except in different language. If I recall correctly, I think even the Koyach HaMaskil he spoke about as three levels as well. I want to go back. It could be that what we learned is actually taken from this section that we're learning now. So it's all relevant to the whole concept. What bottom line is that there's no radical leap. Everything works in very organized fashion. You have an etzem, you have a koyach atzmi like a koyach hamaskil, the ayin, then you have the chochmah, which is in the general sense, seichel is flowing. You have seichel. And then you have a seichel prati, a specific idea that becomes the koyach prati that he says here. So machshava serves two roles. It serves the third role, obviously, because machshava is the conscious thought of any particular idea. But now he's added that machshava also serves a role in the second level, before the koyach becomes an actual something concrete, it already also serves as being a flowing, like I said, a turning wheel. Machshava mishetetes tamid. Here he doesn't say the word mishetetes, but other places that machshava is there, the idea that you're a thinking person, a human being is an intelligent creature. Intelligent creature is not just koyach hamaskil, it's already seichel, but it's not a particular intelligence. And those are the three levels that he describes. And machshava is melabeshes bechinas habeis hanal. And then he adds, ulamayla yashlemer. 1 second. And what is this above? He called it pnimis hakelim. So here too, you have oyer, pnimis hakeli, and chetzenius hakeli. So oyer would be like the koyach hamaskil. It's oyer. It's not etzem. It's already oyer. And then comes a pnimis hakeli, and its entire role is to serve, just to absorb the oyer. Just like the oyer's entire purpose is to express the nefesh, or the etzem. And then from the pnimis hakeli comes to chetzenius hakeli, where you have a particular detailed and defined function. That would be how he's explaining that. So you have the pnimis hakeli is like the machshava. And yes, like a keli, because it's a keli sometimes is like a lavush. Okay. Now, before I continue, does anybody have any questions? Because with this concludes the parentheses that began 6 lines from the bottom of the last page. Okay, now he's going to go and say something even stronger. So we've established now is that machshava has something unique. It plays a role even in the earlier stages of faculties beginning to manifest. But now he's going to say the machshava goes even deeper than that. So on the line on page 1178, the line that begins be'etzem ha'ir, as you see, that concludes the parentheses on the bottom of page 1177. So if you read from before the parentheses, he said, and then comes the parentheses where he explains it all with the koyach hamaskil, chochmah ma'ayin timotz. Okay. Now he says, the chain, and so it is, b'chlolos hanefesh. Chain b'chlolos hanefesh hu, shemachshava milabeshes klolos va'atzmus hagili eir v'achayis shel hanefesh. Keidum sheba adayin be'ezeh plat kayach. So now he's broadening it. That machshava, just as we said, machshava serves as a garment. And I describe the garment as a field of energy or as a quilt, basically a placeholder where there's energy, but it's not yet in a defined chachma seichel prati. So he says the same thing, klolos hanefesh. And same thing with the klolos hanefesh. U'shemachshava milabeshes, machshava serves as a garment that encloses the general and atzmus hagili eir v'chayis shel hanefesh. The general vitality and life force of the nefesh, kedem sheba adayin be'ezeh prat kayach, before it comes into any particular faculty. So what he's broadening now, he's saying it's not just a garment for seichel, for the second level of seichel. It's also a garment for the general life force of the human being. Now, how do we explain this? Here, I think what yesterday was asked, Eliezer asked the question, if you remember, about the central nervous system, or that's the way I explained it, that you see that even before there's any particular function, the mind has the power and is like the control center of the entire body. So a person, for example, thinks, I want to move my toe, or I want to move my arm, or anything else that the body function. So it's coming from a machshava. Not machshava as per se a garment for seichel. It's also a garment for movement or for other things that the body does. For example, the fact that he mentioned we breathe, the heart is beating. That is coming because the mind is sending off signals to the different parts of the body. It's not conscious. Some of it is just automatic. That's what a healthy body does. But there is a message being sent. So there's a concentrated and concerted effort of sitting down and concentrating on an idea. Or even concentrating, I'm going to throw a stone, or I'm going to write a letter. But then there's a life force that is constantly flowing through the body, and it's also being controlled by the mind, what he's calling now machshava. So you see machshava, before there's any actual faculty, there's a general consciousness, or I'd rather put it a general energy that is flowing from the machshava to all the parts of the body all the time and maintaining the existence, the life and vitality of a human being on a biological level, even when you're asleep. Similar to what we said before about machshava being a lavush to the seichel, the seichel, it's also lavush to hanefesh. That's what he's adding now. I believe that's one way to explain it. There may be other ways, but that's what the Rebbe Rashab said so far. Let's continue reading. Maybe there'll be more details. And why is this the case? That machshava has this ability to be such a lavush on both levels. V'zeu lefisha machshava hu lavush ruchni meruchnis hanefesh. Because machshava is not a tangible, a concrete form of garment. It's an ethereal one. Ruchni here, he means ethereal, sublime. It's very subtle and very spirit-oriented. For example, Maisa, remember we learned koyach ha-maisa is the lowest koyach in the human being, because Maisa is about mamoshes. You build something, you write something, you do something. It's an action. In Levushim, Maisa would be the antithesis of machshava. Machshava is the most sublime. It doesn't have any substance. It's a thought process. And here, as we said here, it's more than just a thought process. It's like an energy flow that serves as a garment to all the faculties and to the seichel as well. So it's a ruchni, levush ruchni, meruchnis hanefesh. It's an interesting expression, ruchnis hanefesh. What does he mean by that? Isn't everything in the nefesh ruchnis? Meruchnis hanefesh means from the more, let's call it the spirit, the ethereal, and the another word I want to use is non-tangible, sublime part of the nefesh. Now he's going back to what he said in the bottom of the last page. Remember when he said, a person asks you, what are you thinking? He says, I don't know what I'm thinking. So what did he explain? It doesn't mean there's no thought. It means that you're not aware or conscious of what you're thinking. So you're comparing that now to the levush ha-machshava. What's going on when a person is saying that? It means that the asias of machshava are not sensed by the person, even himself. So a lot of times, for example, a person is just sitting and not focusing on something. The thoughts are flowing. Sometimes someone asks you, so what were you thinking about? And you say nothing. Not only nothing, but you don't even yourself remember. There are many times we just have these random thoughts and they're not focused. They're just flowing out of the machshava. So he's explaining now something he didn't say before. He's adding, there are asias, but you're not sensing the asias. Because machshava by definition has to have asias because that's what makes it thought. Doesn't mean it's conscious thought, but it means that there's something that is giving it some substance. So why is he using that as an example? That means Eina Murgashim, that's what he means, Ruchnius. Murgash, when you say something is tangible, like you're active, thinking something very tangible, or speaking, or doing, there we call it more Megushim. Not more Megushim in a negative way, meaning more concrete, more tangible. When you're talking about a thought that you don't even know what you're thinking, like he says here, that's intangible, because the letters are not sensed. You don't even sense the letters of that thought, even yourself. Valkain, and because machshava is this type of very sublime type of garment, so let's use a physical example. When you put on a garment, you can put on different garments. You can put on a garment like a thick coat, a heavy coat, keep you warm and so on. You could also put on a garment that's a very flimsy and even transparent, slight like silk. It's also a garment, but it's a much more edler garment, a much more refined one, and therefore also going to reveal more, because it's not a thick garment. So in other words, you can have, I'm trying to think in halacha or in Torah with the big day kahuna, let's see. Like when we talked about Oita Erke Salma, that the oil is like a shirt, so it explains it's a transparent shirt. You can wear a shirt that's thick and blocks, and therefore like obscures what's behind the garment. But there's a garment that's a garment, but it's a revealing, very revealing. So machshava being so edel and refined to the point that it even could be something you don't even not even aware of, like you just said. That's why it's an appropriate garment to enclose the ruchnius, the spirit of the nefesh, prior to and before it emerges, it becomes an actual tangible faculty. Like he said with seichel, and the same thing with the rest of the body. So machshava is a perfect garment for this purpose because of its sublime and ethereal nature. That's what he just now added in explaining why machshava serves this role, which he called earlier an interface, actually, because the seichel, the middle era seichel is an interface, and machshava melabeshes. So machshava is that type of, that carries it. I just want to add one more thing, but I'd rather, let me read let me say it right now. Remember we spoke earlier, and this may help actually understand this, that there were two stages in Malchus. Oh, wow. I just thought of something else. I'll tell you in a moment as well. There was two stages in Malchus, if you remember. Melech be'etzem, hisnasus atzmi, how he is in his own internal chamber, where he's not in need of, and it's not affected by, and is completely merumam, completely removed from the nation, from the people. He called that Hoid, not the Revam Hadris, but Hoid Melech. Okay. Then there was a level which he called Malchus, that's Ala Am, not Isnasus, Isnasus Ala Am. And he identified that as Machshava of Ano Emlech, whereas Isnasus Atzmi he called Koyach HaMachshava. So I'm thinking now that this is literally what he's saying here. Machshava, on one hand, is an active thought of Ano Emlech, but on the other hand, it's still the level of Machshava. And it's true, that the Eibish's Machshava creates, if you recall, but still it's on a Machshava level. So there's a level before Machshava, Koyach HaMachshava, that's like removed. And Machshava is the right type of garment. Why? Because God doesn't need to think, obviously, but he wanted to create existence in a way that makes sense to us. So there's a stage where he's actually thinking, Ano Emlech, the Machshava of Ano Emlech. I'm going back now to the pages. Page 1172, where he discussed this. Machshava v'ano emlech. So machshava is a very key word there. That's why I brought it. Second thing that just struck me, remember yesterday we learned about Karnei Heid. We learned about the Keren, the Karnei Eir, Keren Eir, Ponov, of Moshe Rabbeinu. So if you look at the Karnei Heid, so he says Eir Atzmi. So it just reminded me that Heid, a Melech, not Hadras Melech, Heid Melech, is an Eir Atzmi. That's why you need a Masva, because it's an Eir Atzmi. It's not capable of being received. It's beyond the people. So maybe it's connected a bit also. The Heid that Moshe achieved after the Luchas Shnius. I also want to correct something I said. I said there are opinions that the Karnei Heid, the Keren Eir, was after the Luchas Shnius. I didn't find an opinion. There's a question why. The Mefarshim ask, why was it not given to Moshe after the first 40 days by the Luchas Shnius? I don't think there's an opinion that he actually received it. That just correcting something I had mentioned. Okay. And now he concludes about machshava. He says, "V'hu," and this level of machshava, that's a sublime and a much more spiritual, ethereal type of garment. V'hu b'chinas isachdus mamish iman nefesh. It's mamish united with the nefesh. I know you're going to ask, didn't he say earlier that it's not mamish? He said kamoy dover achar, but now he says isachdus mamish. So either he's talking about the higher level of machshava that we're discussing here, which is there prior to actual faculty, or he's explaining the other side of the coin. On one hand, it's not the nefesh. On the other hand, it's nesachad with the nefesh. Ukahadein kamtza the levushe minei ubei. Like that snail. He said kamtza snail. Someone suggested maybe turtle. I think it's snail, but regardless, it's something where the shell is attached to the animal. The levushe minei ubei, its garment, its levush. It's in this case, its shell is minei ubei. It's from itself. It's not a separate thing. It's not like putting on a jacket. It's part of the creature itself. So now he's comparing machshava to levushe minei ubei.
Like skin in this case.
What?
It's like a skin as a levush.
You can compare it to skin, fine. But he's comparing this to machshava. And as I said, to reconcile what he said at the beginning, that it's kamoy dover achar, it could either be talking about the lower level machshava where you do feel the oisius, and the oisius are connected to a particular idea or a particular faculty, becoming tangible faculty, or you could say that there's one side that machshava is still apart from the nefesh, and the second half of it is that it gets united like this. This is why I think he was talking about the whole central nervous system. Like the revelation from the nefesh is always. The nefesh is always keeping a person alive. There's never a moment that the nefesh is not giving life to the being. And since it's connected to the nefesh, because it's sublime nature, so machshava is also always there, even before the actual faculty of seichel or of any other faculty becomes a tangible faculty. Yeah, this last parentheses, I think, solidifies that there's two levels of machshava here. They're all machshava, but there's two levels. The gamba machshava hamalabeshes says keches, and also the thought that becomes a levush for the actual expression of the faculties. Remember, we're talking right now is machshava that's before the faculties are expressed. It's that rolling wheel, that energy. Also machshava that dresses up and encloses the actual faculties, on the third level, when they become actual tangible faculties, there also it's a subtle, sublime garment, umayuchad, and attached and connected with the soul. And then he adds Vaha Baha Talya. Oh, that's a good. And it's interdependent, meaning because machshava on the higher level is miyuchad and expresses the soul's energy, even before there's an actual faculty. That's why also the way machshava functions as a garment for the actual faculty on level 3, not just level 2, is also in that type of form, and it's interdependent. Now, why is it interdependent? Because it's the same machshava, that's why. The pashtus. That needs a little explanation, because l'cheira, seemingly, machshava has now moved from a general field of energy into a specific expression. So then the question is it the same? Yeah, I would say something like this. Yeah, I think the way I visualize it, at least, is as follows. If machshava is, like I said, the carrier, so to speak, of the energies, the soul's energy, it's the carrier of the oir, like Pnimius Hakeli. It's the carrier of oir, and it's there all the time, so you don't have to begin, like I said, warm up the machine to begin to think and conceive. Machshava is there. There's some expression. But if you ask someone, what are you thinking about in that place? He will say nothing tangible. That machshava, when now a faculty begins to emerge, let's say an idea, the chachma, the third level of an actual idea, so that garment now is still the same garment. Now it's taking the shape of the idea. So it's not a second level of machshava. It's this garment before was just a garment that was there for the whole nefesh, or for the koyach hamaskil in the seichel. And now the garment is taking shape. It would be like you wear a garment and it's not yet doing any particular function, but then when you do the function, the garment is still with you. And it becomes now channeled to that particular faculty. It becomes that garment for that particular faculty expressing itself. So therefore it's haba hatalia. Because just as machshava was there before on a very sublime state, that subliminity continues on as it becomes a garment for the specific faculty as it manifests in a particular way. That's how I would explain it. I hope that last piece I just said made sense. To me, it seems to me being a field of energy, that God uses to express himself, right? We learned that. Machshava is like what is to the etzem, machshava is to or like what is to the etzem, primis hakeli is to and chetzenis hakeli is the third level as it expresses itself. So in other words, there's the hanefesh, not the etzem hanefesh. The hanefesh needs some type of manifestation. That's machshava, and that machshava too goes through levels until it becomes a specific idea or a specific faculty. Yeah, that's how I would explain this whole piece.
So the Oir HaNefesh is the Yuli, right? Compare the Oir HaNefesh to the Koyach HaYuli, to level 1.
Yeah, like Koyach HaMaskal, yeah.
And the Machshava is not the... I have a hard time to understand that the Machshava is connected even to that.
Well, this is the whole piece we're learning here. That's what we're learning. That's what he's
learning
teaching.
About Beis, about the second one, that's a seichel.
And I really explained it, I thought, very thoroughly. So if you have a specific
question, my question, is this connected also to the Koyach HaYuli, Hamaskil?
Is the etzem? He said is the mamutza ben Koyach Hamaskil v'aseichel haproti. Said explicitly.
I'm asking about the machshava is connected also to Koyach HaMaskil, not.
He doesn't talk. He says machshava. He malabeshes bechinas habeis. Not bechinas ha'alef is not in any way conscious. There's nothing happening. Koyach HaMaskil does not need machshava. It's only when there's a oir seichel, there's a manifest seichel that is now something is flowing of intelligence. That's where you need machshava. That's where machshava. He says clearly, malabeshes bechinas habeis hanal. Does not say malabeshes bechinas ha'alef. Koyach HaMaskil.
So machshava is like an expression on each different level. The same machshava.
I think the Pnimis HaKeli gives it away, gives it to us. It means machshava is taking the oir and giving it some type of, some container, if you wish, some presence. I would say it's presence. So even though oir is got divine awareness, but machshava turns it into something. Like for example, machshava ano emlech. Before God had the thought to be king, there was no machshava. What was it? It was all in. It was more oir. It was a level of oir, etzema oir, or whatever level of oir. Then comes the machshava. Machshava. In that case, machshava is a specific ano emlech. Machshava is always going to be connected. Remember, the garment is always a form of expression. Basically a way of beginning to define it. But there's two stages here. Where first it's just a machshava that is carrying the malabeshes. The Oir HaSeichel or the Oir HaNefesh. In other words, it's present. I said before, the human body is being controlled by the mind all the time, even if you're not thinking about it. So machshava is working all the time in carrying the messages from the mind, from the brain to the body. The same thing with seichel. It's giving the idea that you have seichel. A person's a chacham gadol. He has seichel. And then comes the stage when you have the specific faculty, the actual faculty. In the language that we've learned earlier, there could be the koiches ha'atzmim. We learned koiches hiyulim, koiches nalamim, and koiches gluyim. It could very well be that this is like the koiches nalamim, the middle level, the second level. It's not Gola yet, but it's Nelam. But it's also not Atzmi or Yuli. So it could be that's the middle place. In the Shemus, it could be Shema Etzem, Shema Toyar, Shema Pu'ula. So Shema Toyar is again the middle level, like. Or the Shema Toyar, after Shema Toyar, there's Shema Etzem, Shema Toyar, Shema Pu'ula, Shema Kinui, Shema Mushal. Is there something between Shema Etzem and Shema Toyar? No. Etzem Toyar Pu'ula, right? Yeah. Pu'ula is for sure the third.
Shema Etzem, Shema Toyar, and Shema Poyel. Pu'ula.
Shema Poyel. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It sounds like that this is a vehicle for the highest of the nefesh, that it's going to go from Etzem and nefesh even to the Kol Yuri Atzmi. That's going to be the vehicle, that level of machshava, whatever kind of Chassidus it takes on. Is that the idea we're expressing?
Can you repeat that? I didn't understand what your question was. You said machshava is a vehicle. What? I'm listening.
Sounds like there's a vehicle that is carrying the highest in nefesh, even to the level of the Chiyuri Atzmi, and that's what we're determining as machshava, that level.
He says it explicitly.
I love the word vehicle you just used.
Okay.
Vehicle is a good word. Vehicle is a good word. He said that explicitly, but it's not Hiyuli Atzmi. It's a milabeshes, the second level.
That's what
Keich HaMaskil does not travel through machshava. Machshava is a garment for the second level where the seichel is already hispashtus ha-seichel. Remember, we learned that Atzmi doesn't have a garment. It's not subject to garments. Even the highest levels of Giluyim are not subject to garments. Remember, we learned Gimel Rishenis, and that's why the face is not covered. So the level of Koyach HaMaskil is in the level of Koyach HaYuli, Koyach HaAtzmi. There's no garments. You don't need a garment, and it's not, a garment won't do anything for it. Seichel Yuli, it's a power in the nefesh. The nefesh has the power to generate ideas, just like the nefesh gives life. Then comes where it's actually becoming a spashtus of that chayas or a spashtus ha-seichel, he called it. That's where machshava starts coming into play. Prior to the that's where he says prior to becoming the language was koidim shem b'mahus keiches adayin, before they become the actual faculties.
So the beginnes his achtus mamish in the nefesh is not mamish the nefesh. Etzem nefesh.
Well, he doesn't use the word etzem nefesh, does he?
He just says mamish im hanefesh, and he doesn't specify what level. I mean, the etzem nefesh also
because the machshava is serving as you called it a vehicle, I called it a channel or expression of either chayes hanefesh or keches or seichel hanefesh. Yeah.
So it's everything. Okay.
He clearly says that this machshav melabeshes bechinas ha-beis, not bechinas ha-aleph.
Right, but that might be that level of machshava, where we're talking about real osius, and then we go even further deeper in after the parentheses, kalos nefesh. That's what I'm wondering.
That what? I didn't understand why are you trying to add another level? He only talks about two levels here. Machshav on level 2 and machshav on level 3.
Here, okay.
He doesn't talk about another. It's either machshav on level 2. Yeah.
Okay. if I might just bring an outside idea from Samach Vov, it talks there about the generation of Machshava, the mamish with the inception, as I remember, the inception of intellect, the very beginning, basic of the idea, came the Machshava at the same time, that Osius of Machshava that would carry it. It seemed that they both came from the very same point in development of the idea.
That's fine, but how does that relate to this?
The growth of the Osius of Machshava is mamish, the same pattern of growth as the development of the idea.
Okay, that's fine. What we're talking about, the level of Koyach HaMaskil, Koyach HaYuli. Are there any Machshava Osius there? From here, it's clearly no. Here it seems absolutely. Here it seems like there's not. It doesn't say in Samach Vov that Machshava and Osius Machshava exist in the Koyach HaMaskil and the Koyach HaYuli. You're just saying the Osius emerge the same time the ideas emerge, but the Koyach HaMaskil, from here, it seems clear that Machshava starts in level 2, not level 1.
Okay, so the nefesh doesn't need that. The nefesh with its
Etzem HaNefesh, he said, doesn't need a levush. Etzem HaNefesh is beyond levushim. Koyach HaMaskil 2 seems to be beyond levush. Levush is relevant once there's a hispashtus. Did you read? Look at the next to last line on page 1177.
Okay.
Hispashtus hasechel.
Yeah, I know.
That is when Machshava begins to take a role.
All right. We call this then the relationship between the Etzem Nefesh and the Kolach Yuli. We call that Ha'ora.
He doesn't talk about that here. That's not relevant to this mimer. He's not talking about Etzem Nefesh and Koyach Yuli. He's only talking about Koyach Yuli in relation to the second level called Hispashtus.
Okay, but it does mention Ha'ora and how that is
but he doesn't mention in this context of these three.
I know.
So, what do you? Of course, it goes etzem. Remember, I said yesterday, oiris kelim levushim hecholis.
Right.
So that's a given rule. That's always like the way. Oir is higher than keli. Keli is higher than levush. So what are you asking me? What that whether oir of course is higher than? I just gave the example that oir would be more like keichiyuli or atzmi, and then comes the machshava and the ispashtus, and then comes the tangible. He compares it to pnimis akeli. Machshava he compares to pnimis akeli. So higher than pnimis akeli is oir. Machshava is akeli to the oir. So that yes, that he says that explicitly here. He says pnimis akeli be'etzem ha'oir. So there you have it. Machshava is misachid with etzem ha'oir. That's what he's saying here.
Okay.
Meaning it's misachid with the nefesh. But anyway, are we talking mathematics here, or are we talking about you want to explain what in Havana what Koyach HaMaskil is, or you just want to find a place where to stick the levushin? I mean, you have to use the intelligence in an intelligent manner. This isn't just levels. Koyach HaMaskil, by definition, is only a power, a potential power. Potential power. What does machshava have to do with potential power? Machshava is an expression. The question is it expression that you feel or you don't feel? In other words, someone says, "What are you thinking?" So machshava is already an active expression in some form. The question is whether it's an expression before the faculty has received definition. I gave very clear example of the will, desire of building a home, of having a home. I would use that example. If you go, what you're doing now is just trying to find, again, technical placement. I don't relate to it because I don't understand it. What's the point of sticking, if he goes and wants to explain that levushim go all the way up to the highest levels of etzem ha'oir, then fine. That's not what he's coming to explain here. Here he's coming to explain how machshava on one hand is a levush, but it's a very high-end levush that's connected with and expressing and a vehicle of the higher forces, meaning the mamutza between Koyach Yuli and the Koyach HaMaskil Yuli and Seichel Prati. But it's an interface. It's not It's not koyach hayuli. It is the interface between them. It's carrying it.
Okay.
And I explained koyach machshava could be machshava in a general form, a general garment, and then as the garment takes shape, as it begins to be focused and concentrated on a particular faculty or a particular idea.
Okay, so
That's
we're
all.
saying that
That's how I would explain it.
the Hiuli of any koach would use this idea of osius to connect with its actual expression.
No, I wouldn't use those words. I mean, it's technically correct, but he said that was the whole point after the parentheses. Go back to after the parentheses. V'chein b'cholos hanefesh, not just seichel. So I explained that machshav is like the carrier of all the signals of the mind to the body, to the different pieces, the parts of the body. So yes, machshav is the carrier to everything. In that sense, yes, it's carrying from the hiyuli. It's carrying into a state of machshav of the second level, which is a koyach, hispashtus hakeches. That's where machshava takes on shape in level 2, and that will carry it ultimately to level 3. That he says, yeah.
And the muscle of the central nervous system, that's like the cerebellum.
I don't know. Is that what it is?
I don't know, I'm asking. You can use that muscle.
No, it's much more than that. It's every process. There's always a process. Even
By the way, just for the record, I just use that as an example. I just use that as an example to explain this. It could be there's a lot more to it than it could also be that machshava is the carrier. Like I said, you're going to move your leg, you're going to move your, or even the heartbeat or the breathing. The machshava is the carrier of that. That's how I explained it. But it could be there's more to it. It's possible as well.